Hi everyone, I hope you're well. So, I'm sure you can tell by my voice that I'm kind of recovering from being sick a little while ago, but I have some free time that I can use to make a video, so I'm gonna use the time to make maybe a few videos actually. The novel in question is The Day Lasts More Than 100 Years by Chingiz Aytmatov. Um, and I actually took a while to realize this, but I had known for a little while that the proper pronunciation for Genghis Khan is actually Chinggis Khan or something like that. So I kind of figured out that these people were Central Asians. Um, and of course, through reading, I realized that they were indeed Central Asians. They're from what is now Kyrgyzstan, I think. Either that or Kazakhstan. No, yes, Kyrgyzstan. But this actually takes place when that region was part of the Soviet Union. Um, so most of the story takes place around the 50s, between the 40s, well, actually 50s to around the 70s. And then the most recent part of the story takes place in the 80s or so. The story happens in kind of the present time when the main character's friend, closest friend, dies, and he starts to kind of have all of these memories about him and about his own family and other families that have been in this junction, in this small place, right? This kind of settlement around the junction. And they're basically just people who work at the junction, and they're kind of in this desert type place, really isolated from the rest of the country. And I kind of keep forgetting that I kept forgetting really that these people were living in like the second half of the 20th century, because it just felt so rural, that I don't know, I guess I associate it with a different time, but it does. Most of the present time of this book takes place in the 80s, and some of it is set in the 50s and 60s, and he's talking about kind of the history of the place and the other families that have been there. And the main character, I mean Yerigay, who is he's the main character, and Kazangap is the friend who dies near the beginning. And it's kind of sad. I mean, I'm not really going to spoil it, but the main, I guess, plot or conflict of the story has to do with wanting to bury him at a certain place. This kind of like legendary cemetery that there is this whole like myth around, and Yerigay insists that they have to bury Kazangap in this place. And it kind of turns into like a whole conflict, but that place is actually being used by this kind of international organization for space exploration, for a project that basically allowed people, and this is kind of a science fiction aspect as well, allowed these people to make contact with aliens in space. And that's not a big part of this novel, actually. That science fiction aspect is kind of a small part of the novel, but it's interesting that it's almost like it's only telling the story of this place because it happens to be the place where they made this space station. But at the same time, the story revolves around this one area, this one place, and the people that actually live there. So the more important part, so to speak, is not actually the main plot of the story. What really takes importance in the story, in the novel, is the lives of these people and their culture, and their beliefs and these things. And I've never really thought a lot about Central Asians, but I kind of did know, I guess, that they were Muslims, but I figured that because they were under the Soviet Union, they were not supposed to be religious, right? But it seems that they were quite openly religious, even though a lot of them were seemingly like atheists. Um, some of the characters, I mean, but the main character and some of the other main characters were definitely religious people. Probably the most genius thing about this novel is the fact that it's able to craft this kind of fictional mythology from this place that's not really real, and this region that's not really real, obviously based on an actual place and a real culture, but um, he's not really telling you word by word the legends of another place. Particularly, I think when he starts to talk about Mancourts, and which is the legend, is related to legend, um, where the cemetery legend comes from. That part seems that, I mean, for a second I was thinking to myself, like, wait, is this a real thing? Like, is this an actual myth or like legend that he's putting into this story? But when I look up Mancourt on Google, it only turns up to this novel. So he kind of made it up, and it's strange to think that because it really seems so fleshed out and so real. And that can be said about everything. I think every aspect of this novel, all of the characters, and specifically the main characters' kind of inner thoughts, and it's in third person, which even though it's in third person, it still allows you to have this really strong kind of bond to this main character, who isn't really perfect or anything, but you kind of do feel, you understand why he does the things he does and why he thinks the way he thinks. And I think there's something interesting to be said about this, because in a sense it kind of did feel, I mean, it does feel critical of the Soviet state, I guess, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like it's particularly anti-Soviet as an entire thing. It does seem that it's kind of criticizing, I guess, the dismissal, I guess, of cultural or religious aspects, as well as certain forms of, like making, or I guess inventing or catching enemies of the state, as one of the, not really the main characters, but one of the more important characters is a man who had been taken as a prisoner of war in World War II, and he was kind of a suspect by the Soviet state for a while, but they kind of let him go at first, and because he had children, he wanted to write a book for his children to understand what happened to him and where, what he had gone through. And the state, or rather, these officials arrived to the junction just to arrest him, just to interrogate him and arrest him, and he went on to be executed. And maybe that is a bit of a spoiler. I mean, to be honest, it's not really near the ending, so I didn't really feel as strongly about it. And you kind of know from the beginning, because he's not there anymore and his family isn't there anymore, that he must have either died or he must have left somehow. But yeah, this, I don't know. I mean, I really, I feel like my reason for reading whatever I read is often because I want to know what life is like for other people who have lived things that I haven't lived, and they're from different countries, and they're different people from how I am, and this is definitely one of the more like obscure cultures I have read from, I guess, so to speak, like in the sense that it's not technically Western, and it's also not like East Asian or anything. I feel like sometimes Central Asia is kind of forgotten by media analysis, I guess, because I read other Soviet novels or Soviet era novels, I guess, that I have found really interesting. Roadside Picnic, which the movie Stalker is based on. I'm just looking at my bookshelf. The Letter Killers Club. Those are the ones that I can think of. And I have been very impressed by those novels. So I have been just, looking for anything Soviet, and it's all been really good up till now. And this is probably my favorite one yet, because this just feels a little different to those other novels in the sense that this one has kind of more of a heart, so to speak. Like, it has this really strong, like, family cultural aspect to it, and this really strong, like, emotional, I guess, emotional drive that is not necessarily missing in those other novels that I mentioned, but it's just not really made a priority. I feel like, for example, with Letter Killers Club, the style is really more of the priority, and in Roadside Picnic, the science fiction aspect is given priority, and this one is more of a purely introspective and kind of emotional and family driven novel. And I don't know, I mean, of course, I'm not sure that I can, tell you, oh my god, this is the best novel I've read, because I'm gonna read more novels eventually, of course. But when I finished reading this, I really felt to myself like this is probably the best book I've read since up till now. I'm very harsh on books. You have probably noticed if you've seen other reviews of mine, and frankly, I cannot think of anything to criticize about this novel. And again, you may say, well, the science fiction aspect is a little bit underdeveloped. But again, the point of the novel isn't really that one part of the story. That's just like the reason why they had closed off that part of the cemetery, which has to do with the ending of the book. But it's kind of the fact that these people had arrived to space, well, had gotten to outer space and had made contact with aliens, wasn't something that had affected the lives of people at this junction. They weren't really in on anything like that. They had no idea what was going on in that place. The only people who knew were kind of these people had this inside knowledge, right? And I'm not really, well, I don't really want to tell you what they do about that whole alien thing, because it is really interesting what they do, but I don't think it's something that you should find out by reading the novel yourself. There's even a kind of something to be said, I guess, about even the animals and kind of the role that they play as characters themselves in the novel, because there is such a strong bond, especially, I guess, in these rural places. Obviously, people from the city have pets and such, but I think sometimes people in these places have like more, they have affection towards their animals, but they also kind of have this like utilitarian aspect to their relationship to animals. And they have camels, and Yerie has a camel that is kind of more aggressive, and there's been a lot of things that have happened between him and that camel was actually gifted to him by Kazangap, who again dies near the beginning of the book. And Kazangap was always like this kind of older, wiser figure to him, which he, I guess, didn't always appreciate having, but when he lost him, he realized kind of how important he had really been, not just to him, but like to the general place, to that settlement, and there's this like desire to keep on a tradition going, with burying him in a certain cemetery, and Yerie starts to talk about where he wants to be buried. I always find it hard to explain why I like a novel, more than why I don't like it. In this video, you may have noticed I have I typically have a very organized way to review books, particularly novels, because I'm like, plot, writing style, characters, depth, and personal enjoyment. And I kind of feel like they're kind of blurred together when it comes to me like thinking of this book. I don't really think of those things separately. And I kind of talked about each of those things as well throughout this video. But my point here with making this video is that if you have, if you're interested in a novel that you know, it's like Soviet era, or it's like a tiny bit of science fiction, or I guess light science fiction you could call it. I strongly recommend this one, and I'd be interested in knowing what you thought of this. Thanks for watching this video, and well, we'll see each other in the next one. Bye.